Making mistakes when you're speaking, when you are learning Spanish, is a completely natural and normal part of the process. So don't even worry about it. Just get over it. All right, as true as those statements are, they're not really helpful if that advice is just not cutting it for you and you are still fearful of making mistakes and it is actually paralyzing your ability to speak. This is something that you guys share with me all the time, and so it is time to talk about it. Comencemos, amigos. Hola mis queridos líderes del lenguaje, bienvenidos a otro video. Or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Erica. I'm your Spanish coach, teacher, and storyteller living and loving life here in Mexico. And I am here to help you get super organized, clear, and confident with your Spanish routine and your Spanish speaking while having as much fun as possible along the way and reducing the stress. So if that sounds good to you, then join this growing family by hitting the subscribe button and that bell. All right, guys, so I've talked about before about the fact that contrary to popular opinion, adults can actually learn languages even faster than a child can. No, for real, they can. Check out that other video. And that is because of some of the advantages that we do actually have as adult learners, believe it or not. However, one of the major disadvantages that we have when compared to children learning a language is that we are super self-conscious. Yeah, whereas children are accustomed to making mistakes and getting corrected just all day long, right? It's just kind of part of their daily life. We as adults can tend to get all self-conscious and all up in our heads. At least some of us do. I can definitely identify with this. I have 4 practical tips for you, and we can kind of think of them as a timeline. So there's something that you can do before speaking, there's something that you can do while you're speaking, and there are 2 things that you can do after your speaking session in order to start to crush your fear of making mistakes. All right, so what can you do before going into a speaking session? The first thing is to actually prepare for your speaking session in order to make fewer mistakes. I know, right? Now, I know that you want to just flow with your Spanish. You don't want to think about it. You don't want to have to script anything ahead of time. You want to be completely spontaneous, and trust me, you will get there. I promise you, you will get there. But before you do get there, if you are not there yet, then something that is going to help you get there is to prepare for some of your conversations. Now, when you think about it, a lot of the situations in which you're going to speak Spanish are probably not entirely unpredictable. If you're going into a structured tutoring session, speaking session like that, well, literally, it is in your hands to choose what you want to speak about. If you're in a one-on-one tutoring session, you do not have to choose teachers who have everything planned out for you and we're going to do this. You literally can choose what you want to speak about. If you have chosen a theme, then of course you can prepare some of the vocabulary words ahead of time that you know you're going to need, and then use your tutor to help you with the pronunciation and just putting things together. But you already knew what you wanted to speak about, something that's just relevant or interesting to you. If you are going into a group class, right, that has kind of a conversational theme every week, well, ask. If that theme has not been handed to you ahead of time, ask, what are we going to be discussing next week? What's kind of the conversational theme next week? And that gives you an opportunity to do some preparation as well. Your teacher may even have some notes that he or she can just provide for you. Otherwise, you can kind of look a few things up yourself and get so much more out of your class. And regarding this point, I have a whole free masterclass that you can go check out. And one of the major parts of it is applying a method that I call prepare, practice, present. And so if you want more details about how you can prepare your speaking sessions and what an amazing result you're going to have by doing that, then go check out that masterclass at ericurrylanguage.com/masterclass, or check out the link in the description box below. All right, so what if we're not dealing with structured situations like a tutoring session or a group class, but we're talking about everyday conversation? Do you need to train your Spanish-speaking coworker on a particular skill at work? Or what if you're planning on traveling and you know that you are lacking those typical situations like checking in at the airport and checking into a hotel and taking a taxi and going to a restaurant. Maybe you really want to compliment your neighbor on her beautiful garden, your Spanish-speaking neighbor. Well, go ahead and prepare some words, some phrases that you can use for that conversation. You don't have to script out the whole thing. After all, you're not sure what she's going to say back and how you're going to respond. But trust me, going in prepared with some of the words that you're going to need instead of nothing at all is going to help you be so much more confident with that conversation. These are things that you know are going to happen, and so you have the opportunity to look up some vocabulary, to even write out and practice some of the sentences that you want to use, and even if possible to expose yourself to some input that is related to what you are most wanting to speak about. Naturally, if you're prepared, you'll be able to make yourself understood, whereas otherwise you may not even have been able to do that, and you're going to make fewer omission-based mistakes. So by that, I mean that sure, you'll probably still be making grammatical mistakes and things like that, but you're not going to be completely blank with not having the words that you need. Does that make sense? So when we prepare ahead of time, we help to prevent errors that have to do with omission. Now, what can you do while you're in the middle of a speaking session? Take the feedback that you receive and try to learn from your mistakes. True talk, guys, language learning is messy. There is no way for it not to be messy if you actually want to be able to speak and communicate with the language and not just read it, for example. So you're going to make mistakes no matter how prepared you are. But this is wonderful news. What? Well, because making mistakes and getting corrections is one of the best ways to learn. But you have to change your point of view from I'm so embarrassed about all of the mistakes I'm making to let me see all of the new information that I'm about to pull out of this speaking session because of the mistakes that I'm making. But there's something very important that you must do, okay? We want to avoid doing this kind of thing. Pues yo estaba viendo la mapa y el mapa. El mapa. Ah, ok. Gracias. Bueno, okay. Don't be that person who just says, oh, okay, when you get corrected, and you don't even like try to say it again, because it is very hard to hang on to the corrections when you don't actually repeat that thing that it was that you were corrected with. You may want to continue on with what you were saying, but trust me, if you want to hang on to that correction, you really got to get your hands dirty, your mouth moving, and repeat what was said. So it should look more like this. Pues yo estaba viendo la mapa y el mapa. Se dice el mapa. Ah, yo estaba viendo el mapa y there we go. Now, it's true that you don't want to be overcorrected, because unless you have a very advanced level of Spanish, you're probably going to be making lots of mistakes, and you don't want someone correcting you on everything, because not only is that discouraging, but it takes you out of the flow of what you're saying. It really messes with your thought process. So experienced teachers and tutors generally know when to pop in and when to refrain, because they understand that as well. So it may take some trial and error to see what you like, how you feel, how much you actually like to be corrected. But if you want to take it a step further, you could even tell the person that you're speaking to that you really want to be corrected on a certain thing, because you're trying to focus on a certain thing and really mastering, for example, the articles in Spanish. So maybe you constantly get confused between el and la and los and las, the masculine and the feminine, and why so much complication? Well, you could tell the person that you're speaking to, especially if this is kind of a tutoring session where the teacher is going to understand what you're even trying to work on. You could say, please correct all of the articles, okay? When I mess up the el and the la and the la, correct that, and let's just leave everything else alone for now. Okay, so now you're kind of really taking control of the session, as you should be, because you are the one learning, and you're really asking, okay, this is the focus that I want. Can we focus on this so that I can actually improve this area, and then I'm going to go to something else. It works like magic, y'all. But again, most importantly, be active when you're receiving correction. Say it again properly. Don't just do the, okay, thanks. No, actually say it again as many times as you need to really feel comfortable. So even though this may be a bit easier if you're in sort of a formal speaking session with a teacher or tutor, it absolutely applies to your everyday conversations as well. So when you're speaking and you get stuck and someone gives you the word or corrects what you're saying, do your best to actually be active and repeat what it was now in the correct way to help form those pathways in your brain, help it get used to saying it correctly. That's going to help you. And knowing that you're going to do that gives you more control over the situation. Like I mentioned, instead of thinking I'm going to make so many mistakes, think what am I going to walk away with after this conversation that I did not know before. That is a beautiful mindset shift that is going to help you so much. And perhaps if you're in an online speaking session, then perhaps ask your speaking partner to put it in the chat or wherever so that you can go back and review that later. Also, if you're in an online session, record it or ask if you can be provided with the recording so that you can review it afterwards. And that leads me to what you can do after the speaking session to start to just ease up on the mistakes and start to embrace them, honestly. After speaking, review. So again, if this was a formal type of speaking situation, then you probably have your own notes that you are taking. You have the session recording. You may have notes from the chat that you downloaded from the chat. You can do that on Zoom or ask your teacher to send over any notes that were placed in the chat. Review that. And if there are too many things for you to really try to work on before your next speaking session, choose the ones that are most important to you. A lot of times people say, well, I get corrected, but I keep making the same mistakes all the time. One way to help with that is, as we mentioned earlier, to kind of have a focus of what you want to be corrected in during your speaking session. But that's not always possible. So another thing that you can do is that afterwards, when you are reviewing your notes, choose one or two things. Okay, choose one or two things and don't just look at how to say it right. Actively repeat it just like you did while you were speaking, and perhaps write a few new sentences using that correct word, that grammatical structure, or whatever it was. Okay, do it a few times. We have to create those pathways in the brain. We have to use it several times correctly in order to not continuously make the same mistake. So absolutely take the time to review your notes. It can be even more important than the time that you spent in the actual session. Don't forget that you have to be an independent language learner. You have to take advantage of the time that you have on your own in order to truly progress with the language. No teacher, no tutor can actually transmit every single part of the language to you, so don't ever expect that. And here is a bonus tip. Have a good sense of humor when you make mistakes, and you should probably keep some of them written in your journal or something so that you can have a good laugh over them. I remember back in the day when I was supposed to train a new coworker at work, and I kept telling him that I was going to help him with his entretenimiento that day, with his entertainment instead of entrenamiento, which is training. I didn't know why he was smiling at me. I was like, okay, I don't know. But yeah, definitely have a good sense of humor about your mistakes. This is a process and it should be a fun one every step of the way. Quick review. To crush your fear of making mistakes when speaking Spanish, number 1, prepare ahead of time if possible. Number 2, take the feedback that you receive during your speaking sessions and actively try again. And number 3, review. Review your notes, review recordings, review anything that you need to. And that bonus tip, keep a good sense of humor about it. Even write down some of your mistakes so that you can share them in the future with other people who are in your shoes as well. It's gonna make for great stories later, trust me. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful for you. If so, give me a like and go check out my free masterclass, ericareallanguage.com/masterclass, since we get into all of this in quite a bit more detail. I'll see you next time, language leaders, but until then, don't forget to go out and live your new language today. Hasta la próxima.